Hello, I'm Dawn Durham, and welcome to PaTTANpod. We've been talking with Dr. Amanda VanDerHeyden and Dr. Robin Codding about their recent article, Belief-Based versus Evidence-Based Math Assessment and Instruction, What School Psychologists Need to Know to Improve Student Outcomes. Thank you, Dr. VanDerHeyden and Dr. Codding, for continuing to talk with us about the differences between belief-based and evidence-based instruction. We're so glad that you're able to join PaTTANpod for this. It's exciting to be able to talk to you, particularly about this episode, because we want to really talk about some of the underpinnings about math anxiety. So if we could just kind of jump right into there, you've identified attention and a pretty common belief that there's a lot of anxiety in mathematics. Help me in understanding what we know to be true. What is the evidence saying about math anxiety and for these students in our classrooms? Can you help us understand what's the evidence out there on this?
I'll take it. I don't mind. So I think, first of all, it's overplayed. There's less anxiety than we think. Okay. What's her name? Sarah Hart is doing some great research to just try to document the occurrence of how much math anxiety do people really, really have. And the way you document that or measure that in the measurement world is you give people these batteries around asking survey type questions about how do you feel about math? Do you feel anxious? Does it make you, I don't know what her items are, but there are some validated instruments to really measure the occurrence of math anxiety. And so first of all, one of her key findings in the last year is that it's not as prevalent as we might think. And I know that herself and another colleague of hers are doing some follow-up studies to look at the occurrence of math anxiety among teachers. Susan Levine has done quite a bit of that research. We cite a Gunderson et al. Paper in our article that we wrote because Susan has many studies looking at the occurrence of math anxiety and how that can be contagious and transmitted to kids. But here's the takeaway. The takeaway is that math performance or proficiency is negatively correlated with the occurrence of anxiety. So the stronger the skill, the less the anxiety. The weaker the skill, the greater the anxiety. We do not know that one leads to the other. It appears to be a reciprocal relationship that they feed in, like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? They feed into each other, okay? And one begets the other. Now, what is very encouraging to me, I always want to know, okay, well, that's the problem. We've defined the problem. How can we solve this? We do not solve math anxiety by having children avoid math. We do not solve math anxiety by having children avoid rigorous content in math. Even children who are on an individualized education plan, receiving services in a school, they have a right to have access to rigorous and challenging content aligned with their proficiency level, but it should be rigorous and it should be focused on building both conceptual understanding and mastery of math concepts and skills. They have a right to that too. If we meet them where they are, we can do that. So you do not reduce anxiety by avoiding rigorous content in math. You can attenuate anxiety with students by having children embrace a message and using language in your classroom that is about improving your performance, that you're only sort of working against your own record, right? So I'm working my math brain. We have this in a script that we use. My math brain is like a muscle. And when I practice and I work my math brain, I'm getting stronger. I'm getting stronger in math. So I can beat my score from the day before. We use that all the time, and setting, goals that are individual to a student. So you don't have to be the top performer in the class. You don't have to make a perfect score on this particular assessment. You just have to do better than you did yesterday, right? So that's called growth mindset, right? And so that embedding that into your language around math and really serving as a positive example, because math anxiety can be very contagious. And there's a great study that came out of Dr. Levine's lab that female elementary teachers may inadvertently convey anxiety to their first and second grade students. That's not surprising to me because a lot of teachers who teach at the first and second grade level teach there because they love to teach reading. And many of them will tell you, oh, I don't know, I don't like math, I was never very good in math. The math concepts in first and second grade are not that challenging. And so you have to be careful as a teacher that you are conveying a can-do attitude. We can learn this, we can master this, we can do better than we did yesterday, we can have better understanding today than we did yesterday. If we practice, if we're thoughtful, if we work hard, that's how you attenuate math anxiety.
Dr. Codding, before I have you jump in here, I just want to make sure I understand this. Math anxiety or anxiety in mathematics does exist. We acknowledge that, but perhaps it's not as prevalent as we thought it was. And what I hear you saying, and this is something to really be mindful of, is sometimes our own personal anxiety could get kind of inadvertently pushed onto our students, and that's something that we do need to be mindful and careful of. So, Dr. Codding, if you have anything in regards to adding to that, or if I've misspoken, please share, because I think that's something that's to really be thoughtful about.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we have this culture, right, in America where it's kind of funny to say, oh, I don't know math, or math is hard, or I when would I ever use math? And that's actually pretty dangerous when it comes to thinking about and using math. Math is a core feature of all of our existence. A lot of the technology and tools that we rely upon are founded in math principles. The number one prospective job is going to be in a math-related area. Mm-hmm. So we need to have a different conversation about math. And of course, in the classroom is when we need to combat that. So I think, that's a really critical component, is that we are actually talking about math in a positive framework. And then the prevalence rates, they haven't even really been studied that well at the younger child level. And I think most of the data, Amanda, you can correct me, is at the adolescent or adult.
Yes.
Too. Yep. So we don't even know what that prevalence is.
So I think this is an interesting conversation to be having, because there are still a lot of questions around this tension, this anxiety mathematics piece is, how prevalent in younger versus adolescent students and versus the teachers and compared to the students. And you had mentioned, both of you had mentioned this idea of kind of which one came first, the skill or the anxiety, and how they may feed into each other. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And as you've been talking, I've been trying to jot a few things down. And so I just want to talk for a minute. What does this mean for those in the classroom? Here's what I'm hearing so far, and if you could just kind of add on to this. I'm hearing we don't want to avoid rigorous mathematic content. That's not going to be a solution. I'm hearing we want to talk positively about mathematics and about having this growth mindset. I may not be able to do it yet, but I'm improving. I'm going to continue to get better. And really being mindful of our own thoughts kind of being portrayed onto the students. What else could I be doing in the classroom to help with this, to help with this sense of anxiety?
The number one thing is improve mathematical skill proficiency. Mm-hmm. So this is part of the benefit of I think of like Fluency Building is really like a vaccination against failure for kids. And when children find the skill easily accessible to them, they can use it, they can solve a problem rapidly. That builds a sense of confidence. And that doesn't happen without practice. But if you are providing practice with support and guidance, you are not, this is sort of the danger of, discovery-based learning and inquiry-based learning, where you sort of allow kids to, get down in math content that they don't understand. And they're supposed to figure out how to solve problems they've never really been taught how to approach without any teacher input or support. That's one of those extreme sort of modern math myth kind of messages for educators that actually can stoke anxiety in children, and it can be counter to what your goal is. So there is a place, of course, for allowing children to wrestle with challenging math content, but that really needs to be done under the close and continual contact and supervision of the teacher, not parents at home, but the teacher, who is watching, supporting, and providing some scaffolding around the child's responding so that they can be successful. That's how you attenuate anxiety in classrooms. The other thing, too, that I always say is you can get really distracted with parents and teachers by really focusing on the anxiety. Mm-hmm. And you can't really treat the anxiety without treating the skill. So the best thing to do, I think, for teachers is use the wonderful rapport and relationship that you have with your children to create a classroom that feels supportive, where all children can have an opportunity to improve their performance from the day before. It kind of makes it not a high stakes situation. They're just trying to grow. Everybody can grow. All learners can grow. Right? All adults can grow. All children can grow. That's the message. And when children are in an environment like that, where they can get assistance if they encounter something they don't understand, they are building fluency, so the responses come a little more easily to them. Anxiety will naturally go away. It will dissipate.
So we're really talking about building up our skills. Skill building is what you're saying would really help kind of alleviate that notion of having that anxiety.
Yeah, and I would just add exactly that. I was going to say the exact same thing that Amanda said, which is build fluency. We need to build fluency, and that means we need to have timed practice. And the data is really clear on this. It's been actually isolated in numerous studies. Timed practice, there's nothing that beats timed practice to build fluency. All children need the opportunity to have timed practice. They need the opportunity to have their own learning goals and to see what knowledge they are gaining each day. Those are all practices that I've heard teachers say, well, I'm nervous about doing that because it's actually going to create anxiety and it's actually going to do the opposite. So there's this whole notion that timed tasks like timed drill or we talked about timed tests, that will actually cause anxiety. And there isn't any data to support that. So my research team and I have these graduate students who are set out to find all of the studies that evaluated empirically timed tests or tasks and measured anxiety. And we were going to do this systematic analysis and then a quantitative analysis called a meta-analysis. And they found 4 studies. That was after expanding from pre-K to college. There's 4 actual empirical studies. Of those, there's 2 that have been done with children, so K-12, and there's only 1 that sampled general population of students. It was by Grays, Reimer, and Schwartzmiller in 2017 it was published, and it's a fascinating study because it actually demonstrated that, yes, children with high math anxiety overall performed worse than children with low and moderate levels of anxiety. And it also demonstrated that under the timed condition, every single group did better. That means the kids with low, moderate, or high anxiety did better under the timed practice condition. No holds barred.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I think those are interesting pieces to bring up. Absolutely interesting pieces to bring up.
We just collected data for a big study in Arizona, and I had the kindergarten groups. And so this was a measurement study. So these children completed 24 assessments over 2 days, and they were kindergarten children. And so I had the opportunity to watch them and, of course, think about how their performance was going to factor into our analyses. And one of the things that we absolutely saw, again, they received no instruction. It was just timed assessment, brief timed assessment, which is practice. That is a way to build fluency. And of course, I watched their scores creep up on every skill. All of the children, there were 50 kindergarten children, they all grew. And of course, we'll have to account for that in our analyses because in effect, it's a fluency building tactic to just provide time practice. So 24 assessments in their case was 24 minutes. So 24 minutes of time over 2 consecutive days, which I would not necessarily recommend that for kindergarten age children. You could do it in shorter intervals. We saw dramatic growth. And the other thing is this little kindergartner strutted in and he goes, I love it when I get timed because it makes me feel strong.
I was going to add to that, Amanda, too. I've done these goal attainment studies for years and kids love it. They love to stop what they've done. They also love the timed component to it. So it also has what we call in the research world acceptability among kids.
Yeah, it's the adults who get nervous about it, quite honestly. The children, really, they're going to follow the cue of the leader. But I always say to teachers, make it low stakes. You can tell them we don't even have to record the score. If we don't like your performance, if you don't feel good about it, you want to do it again, we'll throw it away and do it again. That's called exposure. So exposure attenuates anxiety.
So then let me ask you this: if we're talking about how excited the kids get and how it gives us so much information, where did this tension come from? What's the root of this? Can you give me some kind of your perception as to where it stemmed from?
You want to take it, Robin?
I was like, no. I don't know. I think I when I saw that this was happening at a very common level, like I said, my graduate students who were practicum students in the local schools that we were in were seeing this, and it was prevalent. I actually emailed Amanda. Where is this coming from? Help me out. Because, this isn't what I've seen in my research, which has been about timed practice and goal attainment for years. So where is this generated from? And a lot of it is generated from this idea of math anxiety is being caused by these practices. But I'll give that to Amanda.
Well, yeah, where is it coming from? Well, I think it helps to become a parent, because then it makes you so much more aware of how vulnerable we can be as parents, and maybe more, forgiving of a teacher coming from a place where they're really fearful. They don't want children to feel uncomfortable.
Sure.
And I think sometimes parents assume and say, well, my child might feel worried about this. And so then the teacher has this kind of challenging dynamic of, do I use this evidence-based tactic that one child might go home and complain, and the parent may make a big fuss, and there could be all kinds of implications for me as a teacher. I might get a lot of pushback. So I really, honestly, I think that the worry about anxiety is a fear that adults who care about children, certainly just naturally this may occur to you. And what I would want to say is, go watch, just try it. By the time you do your fourth timing, if there was anxiety in the first timing, it's generally dissipated, because children learn it doesn't really matter. It's like doing time trials for running to see if you can run a little faster. Children are not crippled by anxiety doing that, And if they are, in the first occasion, after that, they're just trying to beat their score. And so they experience immediately success. And for many of the children that Robin and I love to work with, we like to work with struggling learners. And what's great about beating your score from the day before, which is all about fluency building, that is a gift to a struggling learner, because they now have the opportunity to experience just as much success as maybe the top performer in the class. They are just as much of a winner. And that's a really important gift to give a child as they're constructing their self-image and who they are as a learner, who they are as a student. So for a student to believe, if I work hard, I can improve my learning outcomes, that is beautiful. That's a beautiful thing for parents to understand. So I would just say, go watch it, try it, surround it with the love and concern that you bring. Don't convey your fear, but give that love and support around, you can do this. If we don't like the score, we'll throw it away and do it again, because that's perfectly acceptable when you're building fluency.
I think that's an interesting perception to have, and I think I might kind of segue right into that advice piece that we always want to offer folks here on PaTTANpod is, that advice might be to, before you come to judgment, watch. Go in and experience. Go in and see, what's really happening with those students in the classroom, and the student data and the student outcomes and the confidence building of those students. That might give us some really good insight into kind of stemming this idea of anxiety in mathematics. So I think that's a key piece to understand. So thank you for that. When we think about any other pieces of advice we might offer to those in the field, particularly as it relates to anxiety math, is there any other comments you'd want to make besides that piece of try it out, watch, listen to what the kids are saying? Anything else either of you might want to offer to those who are listening?
Well, I think one of the things for me that's really important about this topic is that avoidance is commonly recommended in schools. Colleges, it behooves me to say that avoidance is actually never recommended to combat any form of anxiety, including math anxiety. That graduated exposure in a positive, safe environment is what you need to do to actually attenuate anxiety. And that really needs to be an important message that comes through.
Yeah. Right. And I think, if you look in the popular media, you're going to find thought leaders who have written and said and made statements like, timing children during their learning process will cause anxiety. I mean, Robin has said it masterfully and beautifully. That is not an empirically based statement. There are no experimental data to indicate that that is true. And in fact, there are data to indicate that that is not true. So it's important, to think about where you're getting your information. If it's coming from Facebook, if it's coming from a book that someone has written, someone can be a thought leader and not be a researcher. And there is a writer who does write about, that timed assessment directly causes anxiety. And I can't tell you how often I give trainings and someone will come up to me and say, well, I follow this person's research who says that this bad, for what you're advising me to do is actually bad and harmful for children. And I always say, well, that person's not a researcher. That person is an influential thought leader, but that person does not conduct empirical research. And the empirical research says the opposite. It's just, again, very similar to the world of reading, that there's, there really is the science of reading, and then there's sort of like reading ed. And we have the same division in math. There are great solid researchers in math. They are typically housed in psychology programs, neuropsychology programs, educational psychology programs, just like in reading. We have the same parallel. And then math ed researchers are often a different crowd. And what I notice is math ed researchers tend to publish in like a single journal that's very popular. And also they do write a lot of books, and they have a lot of great ideas. And I think these worlds need to come together a little better, because all great ideas need to be tested and vetted for the benefit of students. We don't want children being exposed to unconsented experimentation in schools because somebody thought something would be a good idea. I mean, that's how we had learning styles, right? That was a distraction and it was not good for children. We don't want to repeat those mistakes.
No, I think that's a good piece to make, and that gradual exposure ultimately is what's going to limit the anxiety. Those little exposures over a course of time to build up the skill, build up the fluency piece, that will eliminate the anxiety. So I think those are good pieces to to kind of leave us with. So I thank you both so much for continuing. I look forward to on the next episode when we can continue talking about the article that you had published. And as always, the PaTTANpod viewers are always so happy to hear from you. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of you in the field. You inspire educational growth in your students every day. A special thank you to John Ragsdale for producing this podcast. We'll see you next time on PaTTANpod.